Hey everybody, Pastor Vern with today's daily update for June 3rd. It's Wednesday, 2020, one day closer to being together again. We are in the midst of summer, a couple hot days in a row. I don't know about you, but I'm not used to them yet. I'm doing the best I can with it. Not as quite as hardy as I was when I was outside all the time in the livestock business when it comes to weather changes. I enjoy the sunshine and those kind of things also. As we are moving forward, I wanted to jump into another subject today. And today we're going to talk about the lectionary. The lectionary, you have heard me talk about the lectionary, and sometimes I preach the lectionary and sometimes I don't. So what is the lectionary? It's a formal set of scheduled Bible readings for each day's worship. What we get is 4 readings from the lectionary generally. We get an Old Testament reading, a New Testament reading, an epistle reading, and a psalm. In our abbreviated worship that we do now in our churches, we're trying to fit into the 45-minute time limit. We have kind of cut out some of the readings. We generally have 1 or 2 readings. I prefer to have at least 2 because I think we need to continue to link the scriptures together, and that's what this does. These readings are structured so that all the readings have something in common. From the Old Testament to the New Testament to the Epistle. Sometimes it's a little bit of a reach, but it's all a part of the continuing story of our life in God's world. And so we continue to do that. Now, the lectionary is set up in what we call a 3-year rotation, so that we go over the vast majority of the Bible in our readings in a 3-year period. You may know that we get into something that kind of tends to follow a series of stories or a series of events, and that's the lectionary helping us to stay focused on those things that that we need to gather from the church in the different seasons and in different ways. One thing about the lectionary, there are some places where we narrow down to some where we preach about the same lectionary, the same verses every year, because we get into the major events such as Ascension and Trinity Sundays have to do with Easter and Christmas. We use a lot of the same scriptures year after year as part of the lectionary because it tells that story, even though there's some variations there. And so really one of the things that we don't normally look at in the lectionary because generally I follow the lectionary probably 75% of the time. Once in a while I want to get off on another series that I think is important. Not only is the lectionary set up for every Sunday with the 4 readings, but there is a daily lectionary also, and that's for your self-study. And so if you wanted to follow the lectionary, get through the scriptures in an orderly fashion in a period of time, that's what we would recommend. We also call it the Revised Common Lectionary. That's the one that we generally use. That's the one that's most published. Thing that's interesting about the lectionary is if you have pastors preaching a lectionary, you can go to several different churches, several different denominations, and hear the same scripture on that Sunday. One of my brothers and his wife attend a different denomination regularly than what I'm preaching in, and sometimes they'll kind of ask me, well, this was the lectionary reading for this. Yeah, that's what it was in our church too. And they said, well, this was the sermon's direction on the lectionary. Well, how does yours compare? And I find that kind of interesting to see what other folks that are creating and putting together sermons where they go with some of the same scripture, because it speaks to us differently, and each location, each situation can be different. So it's kind of one of those things where we're following that common pattern, but yet we tailor it to to what's going on in our areas and our folks, and to some extent what's going on in our lives, what God's laying on our hearts that is important to share at any given time. Really, this tradition came out of the Jewish tradition. Um, they they had kind of a series of readings that they did, and a lot of folks think the Christian church founded the lectionary, but not necessarily, because um, the Hebrew people used a system also so that the scriptures would be brought forth in an orderly fashion. In fact, we know that Jesus himself did at least one lectionary reading when he was in a synagogue or a temple in his hometown of Nazareth, and that got him in a lot of trouble because people weren't exactly thrilled with what he had to say about it afterwards. It was challenging their faith connections. So lectionary is our word for today. We ask that you continue to watch out for yourselves and others, stay safe, be the church to the fullest extent you can under the circumstances. We just ask that you be blessed and stay well. We'll talk to you later. Bye.